Over 5,000 acres of Irish countryside is completely wiped off the map. Completely disappeared off the face of the earth.
Ballinahown was a town in Wicklow Ireland that got fully submerged in 1940.
People have died scuba diving.
Why did this happen? What happened to the families?
So that's all that survives today of it.
And what mysteries surround it?
Like, this honestly could have been someone's house.
Luckily my friend Will is a local, so I'm going to start by talking to him.
So I'm going to put you under pressure here. What can you tell us about this this lake, man-made lake?
Well, there was actually originally a village under the lake, home to a fair few families.
Like 70 or 80 families?
Yeah, something like that, I think.
What did like local people think of it? Is it like sad, or is it like...
From what I was aware, a lot of the farmers and stuff, like they farmed on land that they didn't own, so they weren't fully reimbursed
yeah.
after it was flooded.
And then you're not allowed to swim in here, aren't you? No?
Apparently not, but
because
I've taken a few dips in here. When there's a good weather, there's a drought. Like, you know, when
we were talking about that.
You can kind of see. I don't exactly know where you'd see the steeple from.
Yeah.
Of the church,
but it's in the middle of there, like.
It does peek out.
This myth about the church is one of the first things that springs to mind when I think about this lake. As a kid, when I was driving past, family members would tell me that you can actually see a church steeple sticking out. And that's actually what inspired this video, was me always thinking back to hopefully one day I get to see it. But is it a myth? Or is there some truth to it?
There's like a whole civilization, a whole place
like
with
Atlantis.
churches. Like, yeah, no, I'd like the Atlantis of Wicklow, basically.
I feel like this is like one of them, like, you know, like city skylines when you like flood your city. That's what this feels like. It doesn't even feel like it's actually there.
Now it's home to like one of the biggest hydroelectric plants and water treatment plants in the country. You wouldn't have a shower if it wasn't for this thing.
No, yeah, that's where my
you
shower
wouldn't have a
water
nice
comes
clean
from.
shower now if it wasn't for this.
Wicklow is home to one of the biggest hydroelectric plants in Ireland, which is one of the main reasons the village was flooded, but we'll learn more about that later. After spending a bit of time at the lake, it made me think. A lot of us move out of our old homes, but go back occasionally to look at the house we once grew up in, or spent a lot of time in. But for the locals of Ballinahown, if they ever went back, this is what there is to remember. No houses, no roads, just a lake.
So all of the water for Dublin goes through this? Damn. Sorry. I needed a setup there.
Do people ever scuba dive it?
People have died scuba diving it. Yeah, it's not advised to dive.
Oxygen tank back in the car.
Because this is a man-made lake, things like swimming are not advised. And since it's coming from two rivers, a lot of stuff is brought with the water, and with a village underneath, things like scuba diving have really low visibility, and also are a bit dangerous. Also, while we were filming, Will told me about a man called CJ that I should get in contact with, that he might have a lot more information for me. So I kept that in mind.
Like, this honestly could have been someone's house, you know? Like, we could be standing in someone's gaff right here,
We
like
could stand in someone's kitchen.
Christmas tree over there. Yeah, this definitely does look like a gaff. The sand does feel weird though. It feels like I'm walking on like the moon or something.
Almost 80 houses were demolished, and bridges all around the lake were blown up in order for this project to take place. At the time, there was a lot of controversy as families had lived in these houses for generations. Also, not all the farmers were fully reimbursed for the loss of land. Not only were the living people moved, they also moved graves to a new location, along with a 12th century cross.
So we can't skim over this without talking about that. Is strange to see at like a waterfront, you know. If you're in Spain, you're never going to see a tree stump in the middle of the water, like.
I don't know if they do have trees at the waterfront in Spain, I'm not sure. But one thing I can be sure of is someone called CJ might know.
I went to voicemail. Hopefully he calls back. He's the man to talk to, like. Other than that, I don't know what else to say.
Because CJ didn't answer, we decided to just go get food and call it a day. After the first day of filming, I thought I knew everything I needed to know, but deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I knew there was way more to figure out. I started to give up on the idea of speaking to an expert. Until just as we were about to eat, I got a call.
I'm going to put you on hold for a minute.
That's okay, cheers. He said he wouldn't know as much. The other fella's like an expert. He literally wrote a book about it, like specifically, so I'm waiting for the dentist. Eventually, CJ took me off hold and he gave me a number for a guy called Chris. Chris has actually edited a book about Ballinahown, so he's a proper expert. And he was willing to give me a bit of his time. Okay, so Chris just replied. He said, what am I thinking? Where do I want to film? And when? We have an expert of Ballinahown. He literally wrote a book. He has original pictures as well. Hopefully get an interview with Chris. And that's exactly what happened. After a little bit of back and forth over the Christmas, we finally met up, and Chris gave me a lot more information that I didn't know.
Some of the graves here were the ones that were moved from Ballinahown.
Well, so from Burgage was the really old church site here.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes right back possibly to the 5th century. Nothing to do with St. Patrick either, probably to do with a chap called Palladius. But before that, you've got it was called Downachimlock. And this is Burgage here. Downachimlock is by its old name, is one of those really old church sites.
So this is the original.
Yeah, you
church.
can even this wall here is part of the original graveyard wall. So our graveyard started here,
Yeah.
extended right over there to that cross and down.
Yeah.
Now, even 200 years ago, a lot of the church had disappeared
Oh, okay.
because I think that the Liffey had basically eroded a lot of the land here,
Yeah.
and a lot of it just collapsed down. So we're getting lots of fragments of bits of the church here because of that. Even this stone always intrigues me. This is actually part of a doorway from around 1200, 1210. This is the doorway of the church, probably the west doorway that you would have gone through in the medieval period.
Yeah.
But at some point they got rid of that doorway and took it down, and this stone was then reused as a windowsill. I mean, this could be even from the east end of the church. You know, the east end usually has a big window lighting the altar.
Yeah.
But this is from a doorway, so it's had two lives.
Yeah, it's gone around.
And now it's had a third life being used as a headstone for somebody's grave.
Yeah.
One of the main questions I wanted to ask Chris was about the church steeple, and I was about to get my answer.
That's another thing I wanted to ask. People say, you know, with the church steeple in the water, that's like a myth, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not actually true.
It's funny because that's an almost universal myth. It's
Online.
the idea of a whole village and town submerged, and when the water drops, which it does frequently, that you will see
The church steeple.
the steeple or spire of the church
But
sticking
that's
out of the water.
not
But that's
true, is it?
no,
Yeah.
there's no church there.
Yeah. This is
At
the
all.
church. Like,
This is the church
yeah,
site.
yeah. It's like with the Loch Ness Monster. Like, it's like a little thing that's everywhere in the world. Like, where it's like, oh, you know, a little myth behind it. Like.
Well, there could well be a monster here for all we know, but there's definitely no church. Definitely no
Yeah.
church. So yeah, in 1940, they basically removed all the burials that they could find in the old cemetery down at the reservoir and moved it to this completely new site. This was a greenfield site. See a lot of these small little headstones here. Even some of those other monuments too, these Celtic style crosses and so on, probably from the 19th century, some of those. All of those were taken from Burgage, from the old graveyard, and moved here. I'm not sure that's really happened on this scale anywhere else. You know, so many families had to move, at least 70 families affected.
Which is like
And
multiple people in
Oh,
families.
yeah, exactly.
as
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
like, so-
yeah. And a lot of bad feeling then locally, not just about that, but also the fact that the dead weren't sacred, that they had to move as well to make way.
Yeah, they
for
couldn't
this
even rest in
development.
their grave. Like,
Exactly.
that's,
Yeah.
The last person from the village, they passed away a couple of years ago, didn't they?
That's possibly true. Yeah, I did speak to quite a few people about 15 years ago who had grown up as children. They were very young, obviously, at the time in the 1930s, but they still had very, very vivid memories of the area. Almost impossible to even imagine, even with photographs in front of you.
That there's
You know, that there was two rivers came here and joined, and that it was all flat bottom land there where they would graze cattle. All that gone.
one person away, like from it
Yeah,
being there. Like,
yeah.
Like how long until they announced it, till the people had to go? Like how long was that?
Well, it was officially announced in 1936. I think a lot of people didn't necessarily believe it. We'll believe it when we see it. But actually, the wheels turned quite quickly. In 1937, they already started working on the dam and so on. It was a slow move for a lot of people. You know, they were very reluctant to leave their family homes. Some people had to be taken out one guy had to be taken out on a boat. He just didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
His neighbours came and took him out in a boat. The water was pretty much around the kitchen table.
The cross behind us, that was the one that was moved from the old cemetery or the old church,
Yep.
was it?
So as well as all the graves, there's a number of other bits and pieces here that were. So this cross must be 1,000 years old. Just kind of illustrates how old that site really is.
Yeah.
And in fact, you know, this church site is even hundreds of years older than the cross itself. So what the scheme was really about was providing electricity and water. It was a dual scheme in a way. But we often think of the reservoir in terms of electricity because the ESB are the ones who are really responsible for it. But actually, a huge part of the whole scheme was the production of water. I mean, it is interesting to think that there's over 5,000 acres of Irish countryside is completely wiped off the map.
Yeah,
Like a whole townland, Ballinahown. I think it's the only townland in the country that has completely disappeared. Completely disappeared off the face of the earth. In November 1937, they started work. By April 1940, the water was starting to build up. It took a few months, and that was the last that people saw of the area. And in the early years, there was a few people died because they weren't used to having a lake here. It wasn't part of the landscape. It would have been strange, I think, especially for people up on the hills, Ballinahown, where they would have been looking out onto bog and to farmhouses, little smoke coming out of the chimneys and cows out and sheep out in the fields and things, to suddenly a lake.
I mean, like, the story is kind of a little bit sad. You kind of did take away people's houses here, and as Will said, like, there was farmers and stuff who like didn't own the land, so they had no jobs then and they just had to leave. It'd be like if, I don't know, someone just flooded your house with water and was like, I don't know, you're gonna have to go somewhere else. That's why I wanted to do it, because I feel like it's like, oh, there's a church that sticks out of it in summer, but there's more to it than that. Like, there's a lot more, so. Who was
rowing there?
I thought that was birds. It's the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
We spotted
Is it a bird? Is it a boat?
Okay, we can go.